If somebody enters entrepreneurship solely for the basis of making money, I don't believe it's going to work. All the freaking failures and those failures are learning experiences, and that I think adds to the resilience that you build over time as a human being that helps you get through it. I found that when I had my health in check, when I actually focused on myself, my presentation, how I dressed, how I ate, my medical condition, my blood work, there was a metamorphosis of clarity that developed.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator. Today we speak with Keith Hanenian. Keith is an accomplished entrepreneur, mentor, and legal expert with a passion for holistic success. His journey from overcoming personal and financial hardships to building thriving businesses has shaped his unique approach to mentorship. One of my favorite parts of the episode is when we talked about fear and failure, and how you overcome fear and how you learn from failure. Hi, Keith, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invite, Moshe. Thank you.
So I love the passion that you and I share about entrepreneurships. And in general, like I was on a show earlier today, we were talking about like gamifying the process of entrepreneurship. And I think a lot of people have this fear. What is a good way to help mitigate those fears?
That's a big loaded question, right? The fears. I think we have fear once we make the decision and move forward. And as we're in the journey itself, there's a lot of fear that takes place. I think one of the biggest let's just say introspective things that people have to do is get an understanding of their relationship with money to begin with, and get an understanding of how they approach money and what they're actually planning on doing. Because if somebody enters entrepreneurship solely for the basis of making money, I don't believe it's going to work. I think that an individual truly has to have a passion within and a desire to be successful in whatever journey or I call it the hook of entrepreneurship that you can't get out. Once you got that hook in you and you know that you're going to take that risk, because you can't get that hook out, then it's just an issue of what you want to do with that hook. And a lot of people chase this concept of money and this idea of success predicated on money. And if they don't get to a reflective, let's just say, posture within themselves as to what am I actually wanting to do and why, and how will I handle it from a financial perspective, there's going to be challenges.
Yeah, I love that, the idea of beyond a purpose. I speak to a lot of young guys. I know you do some mentorships, but people always come to me in the community and asking me different ideas, but I always see that commonality, unfortunately, is like, I want to make money quickly, right? It's like I want to do this. That's the typical thing. And I think back to myself when I was younger. It's like, I want to buy that car. I want to buy that house. I want to, get the women with all this stuff, right? That's the typical way. I'm thinking about how do we could talk about it all day long, but I'm trying to think about, like, for the young generation that's starting out, how do we get them to like breathe and find that purpose?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the challenge, right? Because what ends up happening with the younger generation is they see social media platforms, they see these they have Lambos, the cars, the houses, the jewelry, the branding. And I think they get caught up in this idea of entrepreneurship and freedom or that what they think freedom is with entrepreneurship, which we know is not necessarily the case, of their time. I always go back, especially to the younger kids, and I deal with this too as a lawyer, and I really never understood it. But recently, in the past 10 to 15 years, even when I'd be interviewing people for my law practice, these young kids would come out of law school. You've got to take the time to learn the craft. Whatever the craft is, you've got to take the time. There's no switch that gets turned on and the spigot and the money starts flowing. You have to focus on one particular task and learn it. And that takes time. And bridling that desire to make the money quickly and do something quickly is something that I think is difficult for the younger generation. And listen, even us growing up, we were going through that a little bit too. But I don't think we had, let's just say our patience level, I think, is a little different. We didn't see what these kids see today. We didn't see 15, 16-year-olds on YouTube making all this money. I mean, we knew what, a doctor was practicing medicine for 20, 30 years. Oh, yeah, he has a Mercedes. He's a doctor. I mean, he worked it, things like that. So I think the challenge for the younger kids is to try and get focused on one thing and become the best at that one particular thing, rather than this ADD of just going all over the place, based on a money grab, and become the best that you can potentially be in that particular area.
I think also, going back to kind of like that purpose, if you're just, I've said this before on the show, but it's super important because I really think about this a lot. If you're just focusing on the money, and let's say fine, it'll be good. You're making some money, 6 months, a year, even 2 years. But when the economy goes south and when things get tough, what are you going to do? You're going to start a new foundation, a new business, a new thing, and switch over. That doesn't allow for expertise and value creation, why people are going to you. So if you have a purpose, then when it gets tough, right? When it gets tough, you know what you're doing? You're not just focusing on the money, you're sticking around. And you're sticking around for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you're the guy. Oh, call Keith, call Moshe. He knows, right? I always tell my lawyer, I know we're actually both, I guess you probably still practice. I'm a recovering attorney myself, but right?
You're one of the lucky ones.
Right. Yeah, right. So it's funny because I did transactions right out of law school, and I was like, wait a second, I made like $5,000. It was like a real estate transaction. And then like this guy in like this shorts and t-shirt, and he's making a couple $100,000 at the closing. I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I want to do what that guy's doing. But I love real estate, so that's my main real estate investments, taking things that are broken and watching the process of it and creating value, and for the community, for your employees, for the people that live there. So I really do enjoy that. But I spend a lot of time on this acronym because we all have different fears. And you and I share the fear, false evidence appearing real. Every time I have a fear, I remember it's false, right? It's like my training in my mind. I'm curious, how does that play into your kind of daily mantras or how you live life?
It's so interesting how you use that acronym. I talk about imposter syndrome all the time, and I talk about this concept of, and I go through it with my wife. My wife's got a medical practice, and she deals with it too as she learns and evolves. It's one of those phenomena that a lot of people go through, where it doesn't matter how long you've been doing what you're doing. And I've talked to a lot of people, even on my podcast, very wealthy, successful individuals over the years, and they still have that little bit of doubt in them as they approach each deal and question, are they in the right place? Are they making the right decision? Even though it's been validated, tenfold in the past. What I think that is like a barometer of humility. I use it as a power tool. I try to use it in a way in which I'm able to kind of gauge my preparation and where I may be in the life cycle of a deal or the decision-making process. And rather than using it to stop me from what I'm doing, I view it along the lines of just that barometer of check. And that barometer of check for me, and you know this as being a lawyer, and I learned this years ago, is that concept of preparation and ensuring that you're prepared and you've done whatever you need to do to make sure that whatever transaction or whatever activity you're planning on doing, that you've done your due diligence to ensure that you can deal with it. And then I add to it, listen, all the freaking failures. And those failures are learning experiences, and that, I think, adds to the resilience that you build over time as a human being that helps you get through it. And so it doesn't work as a, let's just say, it's not my kryptonite. I just use it along the lines of it, and I think people can use it along the lines of keeps you in check, keeps you somewhat, humble, but doesn't and shouldn't stop you from moving forward.
I know as we get older, but even as a lawyer, and even Ivy League, I always say this. What happens is that your brain is a little bit more expanded, so you think of so many worst case scenarios, right? So you're like, okay, what if this goes wrong, that goes wrong? And the job as a lawyer, right, is always like, okay, these are your risks. But the trick is, in spite of those risks, if you could find that, you know what, I'm going to take action anyhow, right? That's the job of the entrepreneur. Everyone's like, okay, this is terrible, but you can find, some value from something else. And then the worst case scenario, to your point, is, let's say failure happens. Don't even call it that. Don't even call it the word failure. Is, wow, I just learned something. I'm still in the game. I learned something. So, right, only because of ego and validation of feelings is the reason why we call it failure, right? Because it's like just what other people think. If you just don't care, work on that, right? Stop caring what other people think about you.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to approach things. And one of my mantras that I use, and it took me time, I think, over the years, because my failures, whether it be my relationship failures and my business failures, they were kind of like this, let's just say, scarlet letter or this concept of I didn't want people to know about it. But once I got to a point where I recognized that those failures are nothing more than experiences, and so long as you're able to learn from them and grow from them, it makes you who you are. And by not by accepting them and leaning into them, so to speak, it doesn't have any power over you. And in fact, what it does is it empowers you to move even more forward, because you've already been through it and you've dealt with it. And so what are we? We're the sum of our parts, right? And so as time's progressed and got to a place where we are, so it's like, give it to me. Okay, all right, fine, got it, next, check, move on.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And if you can live life that way, it'll be so much gratitude, I think, and so much of a positive mindset. And with that, more opportunities come. Tell me why I know physical health in entrepreneurship is very important to you, because I do come across, right, people, they're like, okay, we got to make this money, we got to make this happen, and for years they neglect themselves, right? Whether it's healthy eating or physical health. Why, as an entrepreneur, is it so important to take care of yourself?
Well, you've touched on one of my pillars that I speak about so much over the years, and I've always been into athletics and sports growing up. I always had that as part of my life. I went through a very, in retrospect, I say 10-year period of depression where I was in a terrible relationship and I didn't exercise, didn't do anything, had problems with my business, had problems with my marriage, and I look back at that in relation to where I am now. God bless, 15 plus years with my wife. I've never been happier. But when I think about my transition as to where I am, health and fitness were always my number one focus all my life, and everything else was ancillary. When I was in law school, when I was in college, I was always doing something regarding fitness. And then for whatever reason, I ended up giving it up at a certain point of my life, and things started to digress substantially. And I think it's a domino effect. If you're not thinking health-wise, if you're not taking care of yourself from a health perspective, if you're going to lack the confidence in presentation subconsciously, you're not going to be thinking about things that you care about. And I think part of it too is when you're chasing whatever particular goal, whether it be entrepreneurship, the deal, whatever it may be, or maybe you're financially taking care of your family and you're so concerned about everybody else's needs. So you feel that some way by doing something for yourself is being selfish, that you shouldn't do that, or taking the time away from the business deal is detrimental to the business deal. But that's the mind shift that has to take place, because I found that when I had my health in check, when I actually focused on myself, my presentation, how I dressed, how I ate, my medical condition, my blood work, there was a metamorphosis of clarity that developed. And I found that my frequency, and I talk about frequency a lot on my podcast, my frequency level became very high. And my operating level in my decision-making process and how I handle stress and things completely changed because I was healthy in my mind and in my body.
No, but I tell you, it seems just from your emotion on the subject, you know, I'm sure you've had different successes, but you realize you're glad to be healthy, you're working out every day, you're eating well, you know, and the side thing, and that's what people have to realize, it's like, oh, it'll actually be with ease that the abundance comes. It's not like you actually have to work on it. I know, and I've said it many times also, is like things that I've worked on super hard, they generally don't work out. It's the other things that work out. So that's the way it is. Like, take care of yourself. It's not selfish, because that way you can give the best version of yourself to other people, right? Then
Very well said, yes.
Right? Then what are you doing, right? You're going to give, it's actually selfish to give a half version of yourself to people that you love and care about, right? It's the other way.
Yes.
But I want to ask you this, because I know a lot of people struggle on this, is delegation, right? So you start the business, you're growing, things are happening. You have a habit and ritual to take care of micro stuff. How do you transition to the next stage and the next stage as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and continue to delegate and find the right people to delegate? How do you go through that process?
It's probably one of the most difficult things we have to deal with as entrepreneurs, because we are control freaks by nature, and what, especially if it's your baby, especially if it's something that you've developed from concept in creation. I think what's really important, and I've learned this through my journey and foray into social media, that I have to surround myself with subject matter experts, and I really have to put myself in a position where I'm in a room with individuals who are smarter than me in certain areas, and then I have to eventually learn to trust. And how do you do that? Well, just like as a lawyer, it takes time to develop the trust with the client. It occurs in little micro doses of giving and tasks. So for me personally, the way I kind of do it, and I probably do it subconsciously at this point, is that I will give little tasks and just whatever it may be that I need something done. And I want to see how that individual responds to whatever task I'm giving them. And if they come back with just questions in which I have to be the provider of answers, or did they come to me with a couple scenarios upon which we can go in different directions? And really, as time progresses, as you engage these people, you can kind of get an understanding of who you can give a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. But it really takes time, and it really requires somewhat. I mean, I think that over the years, I've become pretty astute in figuring out who can do what. But the biggest challenge I think that people have when they go through this process is they don't make a decision quick enough. In other words, they'll allow the individual to go on and give them a pass or an excuse with regard to whatever task or whatever role you want them to be in, rather than act on it quickly to move on. And we as entrepreneurs don't have that luxury of time. So what we should be doing is, it's like little mini tests, but we should be acting in response quickly and moving on to somebody else. So frankly, what I've done in this space for even building out the platform for Pro to Pro is I'll utilize, initially bring them in as consultants or bring them on as contract individuals and see how they go and how things work out. And if they work out well, so be it. If I find, and you find sometimes people become yes people to you, and I don't want a yes person. I want somebody, if they don't necessarily know the answer to something and they can't figure it out, I want to know where their level is if I got to bring somebody else in. So it really requires a sense of honesty, integrity, but also a sense of action on behalf of you as the leader entrepreneur in making decisions in real time, rather than allowing somebody's, let's just say, their predisposition to affect your ability to move forward.
Well, you mentioned, I just want to talk to the audience a little bit about your Pro to Pro Entrepreneurial Collective. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's so interesting, Moshe. I started this social media platform because I wanted to do something that I never did before. I had been a practicing lawyer. I've been practicing law for 35 plus years, tried hundreds of cases, litigated all over the state, and civil litigation predominantly and commercial litigation. And I went out to the UK, I'll give you a quick story. Went out to the UK. My wife had become friendly with a doctor out in the UK, and they're in the medical aesthetic business. And she had, her husband was this young 30-year-old serial entrepreneur. And I never met him before. I had communicated with him briefly on social media, and I went out and met with him, and he had a podcast. And I didn't even know what a podcast really was. Anecdotally, I had an idea, and he puts me on this podcast that he had, and I actually enjoyed it. And he said to me, "You should do this." And we were talking, because you don't realize how many people you know and your experiences in life just in talking with me, this and that. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I got to do this. I got so much going on. I don't have time to do all this other stuff. Then I came back from the trip, and I kind of had some, let's just say, reflective moments about myself. And then I said, you know what? Why not? Why not? So I essentially decided to move into this world of social media. And my wife had built a little bit of a practice on social media. She needed to do it because in the space that she's in, medical aesthetics and age management, they really focus a lot on social media and building up IG and their platforms. And she was a little older. She was in her late 40s, early 50s having to do it as well. And I didn't get into it at all other than personal. But I started to do it, and then I really started to enjoy it. But I was only doing it because I wanted to lean into an area that I knew nothing about. And I had the naysayers, and I had all the people say, "Oh, what do you mean you're doing a podcast? How do you have the time? Why are you even bothering? And what do you don't have the time? How are you going to make the time? And why are you wasting your time? And podcasts fail, and who cares? Why are you doing that?" And that actually was, I was actually disappointed by what they were saying, but I also felt sorry for a lot of those people, because I sensed that a lot of those people were stuck in the status quo of their life, of wherever they were. So I didn't care. I moved forward, and we're in season 3 of the podcast now. We've closed, we're not as far along as you are, but we've closed about 25 podcasts we've done. And my podcast premise was on my pillars of business, personal and self-development, health and fitness. And my story, as you touched base on, was about how I transformed and how you need to have those pillars in your life for true success. And it's not measured by, the dollar signs. It's not measured by accumulating assets. And through this process, I was like, okay, what am I doing? And everybody would say eventually, well, what are you selling? And I'd be like, what do you mean, what am I selling? I'm not selling anything. This is my message. Well, you're not making any money? I go, no, I'm not making any money. I'm giving back. I go, I'm not making any money. This is what it. And then eventually what comes to me is that I say, I kind of see something, but it's blurry. I see something that we can do with this, but it's blurry. And then as time progressed, about 6 months ago, it came to me, it was like, why not put together a membership or a network of like-minded people who can become my ecosystem within itself of individuals who are focused in this area and are like-minded and can eventually help each other and grow even more as an ecosystem. Hence, I create this Pro-to-Pro Entrepreneur Collective, which is based on, minimum 7-figure level entrepreneurs and up. And they have to be focused on our pillars of health, fitness, business, personal development, and growth, and supportive of each other in whatever fields that they're in. So we've got doctors, we've got restaurateurs, we've got people in the medical practice. I have serial, for lack of a better term, franchisees, things like that, who we're putting in this group, and some of them will act as mentors for other levels. I've got people who've scaled businesses, but they're going to be in an ecosystem, and we're going to grow it and scale it out as a collective of like-minded people, a place to go to help people motivate in different areas, wherever they may be in life. And what I think is taking place is that the credibility of the podcast and the guests that we put on, I don't know when you're going to air this, but we just finished filming with the Atlanta Falcons head coach, Raheem Morris. Very excited about putting him. We did the podcast on the road, which was a lot of fun. Never did that before. And so we're adding just to the mix of the podcast with our guests. I'd love to even have you on, but the guests as being the credibility of the platform to help us create this presence of the collective.
So I really love that. And I got to say, it's always like attracts alike. And I'm sure I have an instinct, always get this instinct sometimes for certain guests. Tell me, Keith, what's something today that you're grateful for?
My health and my wife. For and it's kind of interesting. If it wasn't for my wife, I don't think I'd have my health. She's obviously, from the perspective of, not only my supporter and my biggest fan, but from a medical perspective, she ensures that I really take care of myself. And I'm really blessed in that we're very like-minded. She goes to the gym with me. She exercises with me. We travel together. She's essentially my best friend. And I was one of those emotional, let's just say, I was emotionally stunted from a relationship perspective growing up. I didn't recognize and realize that the person that you choose to spend the rest of your life is the most important decision you can make as a human being. And I was lucky later on in life to find that out, but I feel blessed that I have. And she's essentially been supportive of all the things we've gone through, up and down, whatever it is. So my blessings and thanks go to her in combination to my health, for sure.
I love that. Well, Keith, this has been really, really nice having this chat. And how can people either find out about your show, find you on social? How can they go about doing that?
Oh, we've got, Keith Hanenian Esquire is my IG account. We also have Pro-to-Pro podcast on IG, have a TikTok account, Keith Hanenian Esquire, as well as YouTube. We've got the Pro-to-Pro. You just hit the, DM me Collective for information on the Pro-to-Pro Collective as we build it out, and we'll get back to you with our information. Really appreciate the support. Thank you, Moshe.
Thank you so much, Keith. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Keith. If you haven't already, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribing ensures you never miss an episode and helps us continue to bring you meaningful conversations that make a difference. Thank you for being part of our growing community. We couldn't do this without you. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.